Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast, episode 94.
Welcome to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast with your host, Jack Mountain Bushcraft School founder and Master Main Guide, Tim Smith.
I'm your host, Tim Smith. I'm a registered Master Main Guide and have been a full-time outdoor instructor and guide since founding the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School in 1999. We help people become more skilled, more knowledgeable, more experienced, and more confident in the natural world through our bushcraft and guide training semester programs and multi-week canoe and snowshoe expeditions. You can check out the show notes to all of our podcasts at blog.jackmtn.com. If you're interested in learning more about our college-accredited and GI Bill-approved programs, visit the Jack Mountain Bushcraft School on the web at jackmtn.com. And check out our online network and digital learning academy at bushcraftschool.com. Hello and welcome back to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. We're recording this on Sunday morning. What is it, the 19th September, the 20th, somewhere around there? 20th of September. Tim and Christopher.
Hello.
In the communication level of our semi-subterranean remote North Main woods lair.
It gets more complicated every time we add like another descriptive word to it.
The new headquarters.
Yes. I like it.
I just got back from feeding all the crocodiles in the moat surrounding the new headquarters. And
we've been having hard frosts for the last week. How are those crocodiles doing in the moat?
A
little sluggish?
Yeah, they're a little slow.
I think they're dead.
Yeah. We have been having hard frost for the last week. It's an early fall. We had an ungodly hot summer. And now the pendulum has swung the other way, and it's early in the year, but we've been having hard frosts.
Yeah, I woke up, it was 27 degrees this morning in my wall tent.
Yeah.
Nice and crisp.
Nice
great.
and crisp.
The dog wasn't pleased, but I liked it.
Yeah. No bugs.
Yep.
No bugs.
No bugs. I'll take it.
But these are sort of this is a great time to live outdoors in northern Maine because you get the days, it's going to warm right up to 60 degrees today. And it's going to warm up next week. Our nights aren't going to be this cold, straight through. It's going to warm up again. But you get those nice days where in the afternoon you're running around in a t-shirt and then you just bundle up at night. And personally, I would rather bundle up under a warm sleeping bag at night and not have to deal with mosquitoes buzzing me.
Agreed.
I think that's like the sweet spot for camping and living outdoors.
You know what replaces the bugs this time of year, though?
What?
The mice and squirrels. They're in full on, find whatever they can. I had like 4 of them last night run through my tent. The dog was going bonkers.
Huh. Yeah. Mice are horrible little pestilence pests.
Yeah. And when they wake you, like when you're dead asleep and a mouse wakes you up running through your tent, it sounds like it's a bear or something. Like you wake, it sounds like it. I don't understand how a creature so small can make so much noise.
I've had them run across me in the middle of the night. I don't think I'm trying to remember if I've ever had one like run across my face. I don't think so, but I think I have.
Because you were asleep, you have no memory of it.
Probably, yeah.
I woke up the other night at like 2 a.m. for a call of nature and went to walk out, and I had 2 of them like chased each other across my foot as I walked out. And you're like half asleep, so in your head you're like, "This is the end. I'm just gonna fall off the tent platform."
Yeah, I really don't like mice. That's why I don't probably won't spend a lot of time in Florida.
Why is that, Tim? What's in Florida?
I read about there's a mouse in
Nutria?
Florida. It lives in a castle. It's like 8 feet tall, and it's the head of some massive international corporation.
No, that's a capybara. And they live in South America.
It's a mouse.
No, it's a capybara.
No, its name's like Mickey. Anyway.
We should...
Terrifying.
Terrifying.
A mouse that big living in a castle in charge of so much stuff. Terrifying to me.
How does he open the doors?
I have no idea. Anyway, announcements. I'm putting together a hybrid class for next summer. We're going to call it, in the interim period, before we come up with a really good name for it, the Hybrid Summer Woodsman. And it's going to be a combination of online and in-person. So it will be our standard Summer Woodsman course, but when people sign up for it, they will get access to probably 15 or so video lessons that they can practice prior to arriving at the field school for the course. And then we should be able to refine techniques rather than introduce techniques.
Yeah, the first on the long-term courses, it's the first week. On the shorter-term courses, it's usually the first day or two. But you're just trying to get people up to speed with living in camp, and that limits how quickly you can get into some of the more complicated or higher skill level stuff. And so hopefully with this, you can get people into some really cool things when they're up here.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. And now we have all the infrastructure in place with the bushcraftschool.com online community network. So all that, it's just, the hard building blocks are in place. And now we just need to kind of shoot the video, redesign the course, and get it all up there. So look for announcements on the web about that. And if you haven't joined our online network at bushcraftschool.com, go ahead and jump on there. It's free to join. We've got a bunch of resources on there. And then these things, like these additional courses, will be add-ons to that. And for those of you who are on the bushcraftschool.com online network, we use that on a daily basis, but it's not always for everybody on the course. So we run the day-to-day.
Not everybody on the network.
Not everybody on the network, right.
Yeah.
We run the day-to-day of our in-person courses on there, and they are private groups. So, for example, the fall 2020 Wilderness Bushcraft semester, which we just finished week 4 of, we have a private group on there for the people on the course. So we post things every night, where we're going to meet the next day, what you need to do, what you need to have with you. So it's sort of like a big online whiteboard. And then if people have questions after hours, they can post them there. So if you go on there and you join and you're new and it looks like, geez, there's not a lot going on here. There actually is a lot going on, but not always everybody can see it that way. And it's kind of by design. Other announcements is my old truck was slowly dying, so I have a new to me truck, and I needed to get that because when the fall season ends in a couple of months, I am actually going to jump in that truck and I'm going to drive to Texas, where my wife and kids are spending the winter. So I didn't want to stay in hotels because of the COVID, so I'm tricking out my new truck to sort of camp out and live out of it for a length of time, at least for the drive. So I'm getting a new topper for the truck, and I got the truck that I got has a bed a little bit longer than my old one, so that I can camp in there comfortably, and I can definitely use like a little alcohol stove to cook on, so it shouldn't be any sort of a hardship. And that's, kind of fun for me is upping my car camping game. It's not something I've done a lot of since I was in my early 20s. Then for long-time listeners of the podcast, that I had a 12-foot travel trailer, the Shasta, that I bought in Tamworth, New Hampshire, and dragged it up to Alaska and lived in it for better part of a year. I was pretty adept at car camping then, so it's neat to kind of revisit that, whereas the last 20-something years has been mostly, remote river trips, remote snowshoe trips, things like that. But it's just a little bit of a different animal doing the car camping. So I'm kind of excited about solving all of those problems, right? It's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and that's sort of, that problem solving is what we want to talk about today. That's what we want our students to get. We run into a lot where people just do the things we sort of assign them to do and then never think about it again. But the real learning that happens up here happens in between those assignments, where you work with something long enough and you enjoy working with it. And then the things we play with are the things we remember. And then because those things are in our brain already, students learn to do a lot of like lateral thinking and applying skills they've learned in one sort of hemisphere of their brain to maybe a problem once they get back home. The example for me is that, we took a swiftwater rescue course a few years ago, and the guy who did it showed us how to do a Z-drag, which is a way of removing a broached boat. And then he went on to say that he's never used it in the field, but he's used it to get a lot of ATVs and snowmobiles and stuff like that unstuck. And after hearing that and kind of playing with it a little, it sat in the back of my brain until earlier this year when I was building a little sort of, I wouldn't call it timber framed, but I tried to figure out how to timber frame in my backyard, and I had a lot of trouble getting the ridge pole of it up because it's about 16 feet high, and it was a big, heavy ridge pole. And then this little light bulb went off in my head, and I tied a Z-drag to a branch higher than that, and then with one hand pulled up a ridge pole that I hesitate to admit this, but I had fallen off of a ladder twice with already trying to carry up. So it's stuff like that is a really cool thing that students get from these skills, because they learn how to think abstractly about problems and apply the knowledge they've built up over the duration of the course to them. And it's the same, like Tim said, it's a new problem. Having a new problem to solve, if you like this stuff and it's in your brain, is fun. It's like a game rather than being a thing you have to do.
Yeah. I had a former student describe it as the skills between the skills, right? Like sort of the stuff that you pick up as a result of living a certain way for a length of time. So a couple of examples. Example number one, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. I came home from the fall semester, and nobody was home. I don't remember why. And maybe it was Christmas time. I don't remember. But I was home alone for 2 weeks. And I feel like I'm really adept at cooking for large groups as a result of a 20-plus year career as a guide and outdoor instructor. But at the time, I really was terrible at cooking for myself, where I didn't have like a 14-inch or 16-inch Dutch oven, right? So I had to up my game there using the skills that I knew I had as a result of cooking outdoors. I transitioned. I got an 8-inch Dutch oven, and with the help of a book and a lot of experience, I got pretty adept at making quantities of food fit for 1 or maybe 2 people as opposed to 8 or 10 people. So that was one thing, and it's just really kind of paying attention to small details over time. A couple of other examples, as we go through and sort of develop the new Moose Vegas field, before people are there living there, I have an idea as to where things should go and where the paths belong and things like that. But it's really only by having people live there and by doing it that you realize, okay, this is... you get to compare your preconceived notions with what actually happens.
Yeah.
So that's fun. We just built a small cone shelter with an interior fire there this past week, and I had been scratching my head thinking, where are we going to put this thing? And we ended up putting it right where I thought it should go, which was kind of interesting because it's right on the edge of the field. Mm-hmm. And then, the second we finish that, I think next week we're going to build a big dome structure, put a wood stove in it. And I've been scratching my head where that should go. And then, kind of figure that out. And next it was we're going to maybe build a wall tent platform somewhere up there and, figuring out where that should go. So the idea is just that, paying attention over time, that if I had just placed them where I thought they would go before people were living there, I wouldn't know where the trails were, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So I guess the big picture idea that we're talking about is something that in education is called transference. And that's when you take skills learned in one genre and apply them somewhere completely different, right? And that's the idea that, until we had spent time living there with a group, like I had groups there all summer and then groups this fall, I wouldn't have really known where things should go. Yeah. I had to kind of have that experience living there with them in order to figure out exactly where they should go. That sort of, in a nutshell, it's problem solving.
Yeah. And the example you brought up is a perfect one for the students as well. We built, like you said, a big cone shelter that all of them can fit in. But if they hadn't already built a smaller version of that would have seemed like a really daunting task. But then, that the cone that we built has these ridge or these support rings that are built into it that are bent saplings that we tie on, which is a little different than the way that they built their cone shelter. But having done some of our other exercises like hoop houses and making little raquettes to cook on and stuff, they had an understanding of how to work with that wood, and they kind of just, it was a cool thing to see a bunch of different skills get brought into one big group shelter, which, if week 1 we had told them we were going to build that, we would have had to hold their hands through the whole thing. But after having a few nights in regular shelters, they knew what the shelter needed to accomplish. They knew we told them it needed some support rings, and they kind of could figure out how to do that. And that's that transference thing you're talking about, where they're taking a pinch out of everything that they've done to build something new that they'd never done before. And it was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, it's definitely neat because there are a lot of aha moments. You can see light bulbs getting turned on.
Yep.
So the idea, I'm applying that same thing to me upping my car camping game for my big drive south. All the different stuff, like, am I going to bring a wooden wanigan and a cook kit? And I don't know yet. I'm still thinking about it, figuring it out, right? And it just takes time to do it. And that's fun. I don't feel like I have to do that. I'm excited because I get to do that.
Yeah,
and that's a big mental difference.
It definitely is. And I think, you're kind of proving that point for the last winter, you got really into alcohol stoves and kind of got really good at using those. So now that's in your back pocket for figuring. But if you were just kind of going into it,
well, not really, because I'd be really uncomfortable because I'm sitting down.
Sitting on an alcohol stove would be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You're right. I should think of a different way to say that. You have the information ready and available to provide a way to. You have the information ready and available. So I've been doing this thing up here where I try to say things in essentially the most robotic way possible, so that Tim can't twist them. Non-ambiguous way possible, so that Tim can't twist them into something else.
Yeah.
Because I'm developing a twitch, and I just can't handle it anymore.
I like to take metaphors and murder them by pulling them apart and then claiming that that's not what's actually happening.
You can't murder something that's not actually alive, Tim. You have to come up with a better way to
murder of crows.
Anyway. You guys see what I'm dealing with here? This is like, if I die at 35, it's going to be because of an aneurysm brought on by jokes.
It's a murder of crows. Like, a group of crows is called a murder of crows.
It is called a murder of crows.
Right.
But
the crows individually are alive, but the group of them is not.
But you are on record as saying you don't buy those group terms for animals. So I don't know why you're using it, because you've said before that you don't like them.
Because it's serving my purpose right now in this moment.
So you're saying you're picking and choosing the things that fit into your environment. You're using lateral thinking and bringing in different skills you've picked up in different things.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
That's exactly what you're doing, isn't it?
And just being pedantic.
Captain Pedantic. But yeah, if you hadn't spent a lot of time working with that alcohol stove, that would be that. Now that you know how to do that, you have a way to cook that makes sense to you, and you don't have to learn something new now. But it's a skill that you didn't learn to car camp. You didn't learn that skill specifically to car camp, and you learned it because it was a thing you had and you wanted to get good at it. But now that you are good at it, it's sort of like Tetris, right? It easily fits into the problem that you're solving, and you can go forward from there with it.
Yeah.
I am so amazed that I brought that back to what I originally...
It's like full circle.
Yeah. I haven't even had a cup of coffee yet today.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it's like 10 o'clock.
We have to stop. It's 11.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Sunday morning. Slow start.
Slow start indeed.
So just another example.
Yeah.
I got a couch for the new headquarters house yesterday. And it's been 7 weeks that I've been in this building. But the idea, at first, a little overwhelmed trying to figure it all out and, what I wanted to get for a piece of furniture to furnish a room. But after living here and thinking about it and paying attention to all the little details and stuff over time, then I finally felt yesterday, hey, I saw one for sale. Of course, we were down to Madden's in Presque Isle.
Well, you should have bought it when you saw it at Madden's.
And I did. But had I purchased like a couch right off the bat, right moving in, it probably wouldn't have fit the space that well. So it took me a while to kind of get used to the space and figure out exactly what I wanted, both the objective criteria, but also the subjective, like looking at it, hey, what really fits here? What looks good? How big? What do I want it made out of? Those things. And I think that's a decent example with, transference and thinking about maybe it's car camping, maybe it's building a bigger shelter, that after you have a skill set and you live with that skill set for a period of time and you pay attention to all the tiny details, then it's much easier to make those decisions and add new things.
Yeah, and I think that the best example of that for us would be knives and axes up here. So what you're talking about is having a deep understanding of the problem that needs to be solved and then finding the right thing to fit that. But what we often run into is people want the coolest thing to fit it and show up. The best example right now is B, who is our TA, when he was a student, showed up with a nice knife, but it was a big and bulky thing that didn't really do what he needed it to do up here, and he ended up switching. And I think that having that knowledge beforehand with a problem allows you to better select the answer to that problem rather than having to screw it up a couple times. It's a nice knife, but it just didn't carve feathers the way he wanted it to. And now he has another one, and he's been telling all of our students, to not show up with, to really take into account what the thing needs to do, and what that problem is it needs to solve, rather than just getting the one that looks the coolest to you and hoping it works.
Yeah, the idea of form following function.
Exactly, rather than the reverse.
Right. It's like forcing a round peg into a square hole. That's not a good thing. So the idea is like
So what if you carve it down first with a knife perfectly suited for doing that?
Yeah, then it would. But then it wouldn't be then it would be a round peg and a round hole.
What if it's a square hole or a square peg that's small enough that just the corners of it touch the round hole? Yes. See how much fun this is when people do this to you?
No, I love that.
Yeah?
I think that's great. That would be a great carving exercise.
You guys, I have a really exciting thing. I just watched Tim's eye twitch. I'm starting to pass it along.
No. It's all good. So, transference.
So a negative. So the thing we're talking about here is that people spend a lot of time using these skills and then can apply them to other problems that they have. And so the sort of negative example we have of that is, people that have come up here and spent the whole semester in a camper. And it's not that, they're present for every moment of our course, but they don't get the skills, they don't get the knowledge that happens just from being up around other people that are using these, because we are such a social creature, and maybe you don't understand something the first way, but then you watch another person who's a peer get it, and just from observing and seeing how they're using that system, you get a better understanding of it. Whereas if you are just there for what's on the list, and then you go back to a camper that you don't really need to solve the problems that a shelter does or that lighting a fire does, if you don't work with those skills every day, then you're never going to get to the point where you can transfer those skills to other things.
Yeah, just the sort of awesomeness of an immersion program is living the experience every day for an extended period of time. And then you're actively solving problems as you go. You're actively adding to that database of knowledge. And then it's easier to solve those problems, even if you didn't overtly solve it. Even if it's just I remember, to use the example of us building the big cone shelter this week, someone saying, I remember something I learned when I was building my smaller quad pod, and I can apply that here. So say if someone is just there for the sort of lecture portions of the program and the things that are on the list to learn, much of the learning takes place when you're just out playing with the ideas that have been introduced during the course. Yeah,
I know we've talked about this before on the course, but the first thing we tell everybody before they go do hoop houses, which is a dome shelter that we build, is we drive home the idea really hard not to grab aspen trees, because aspen trees don't bend, they just snap.
They break.
So when we went to build this big group shelter, there was a student who hasn't built a hoop house, and so what kind of trees he brought back? Aspen. And he had to get sent back out to get other ones because they just won't work. And that's the stuff that you miss out on by not really participating in, I don't even want to call it extra credit, but it's one thing to see something, it's another thing to go and actually play with it and spend time in it. And that's where those kinks get worked out. The sort of greatest example of a person that has, because when I think about this, I think about it as sort of a big web where you're constantly making connections, and the more of those connections you make, the easier the next problem is to solve, because you can pull from wherever. And I can't talk about connections being made while you're out on the land without mentioning our friend David Bosom, because it's not when we walk through the woods and we point out things to people, it's partly because we've spent a lot of time out in the woods, but it's also because we're helping them make connections, and that's how we, in sort of people that are new to this, that's how they learn, is that you're pointing stuff out to them. But if you walk through the woods with David Bosom, he, he'll just offhand mention things that are totally gained from slowly observing, or just observing over a lifetime, patterns in the natural world. And if we're talking about that spider web of connections, his is essentially no longer a web. It's a solid piece of material, because everything he's ever experienced is connected in some way, and he can pull that information, that skill from any part of his understanding of the natural world and apply it to whatever problem he needs to solve, in a way that is just, I think we've talked about it before, but watching him carry a shovel, all the rest of us would throw a snow shovel over our shoulder and walk across, but to him it was like, oh, this is flat on the bottom, it drags, why would I lift it up when I can just slide it across the snow? And little stuff like that only comes from a lifetime of kind of making these little connections to the point where everything becomes connected. And that's what we want our students to get out of this, or at least an insight into that. And you don't get it if you're not around to participate in it.
Yeah.
Whew.
Wow, that was a big. That was big.
Yeah, geez. I need a minute. I'm gonna have a sip of water. You talk for a bit.
Well, I think we kind of wrapped up this this idea. So so let's pull the plug on this one. Thank you very much for spending this time with us on this beautiful Sunday morning. We hope you enjoyed this.
Like Sunday morning.
Yeah.
There we go.
And if you did enjoy this, you know the drill. Please leave us a review or share this with somebody. And thank you very much. And we will hit you back again with another one soon. You have been listening to the Jack Mountain Bushcraft Podcast. For more information on our professional wilderness guide training programs that are college accredited and GI Bill approved, visit us on the web at jackmtn.com.